Now, I've used my fair share of weapons in Elden Ring, and that's obviously apparent in the amount of videos that we've made over the past year, but I went back and had a look at my top 5 weapons video, and in there, it had one weapon that I actually haven't used since recording that video all those months ago. And of course, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, that being the Wing of Astel. At the time, it was incredibly slept on as to how overpowered you can make this weapon, and it still holds up till this day. So sit back, relax, and let me show you an incredibly overpowered build around the Wing of Astel. Cheekily, just before we do that, make sure you hit that like button if you enjoy any part of this video. It lets me know that you enjoy them and you want to see more Elden Ring content like this in the future. And if you're new around here and you want to subscribe so you're never missing out on a future video ever again, make sure you hit that button down below. We're aiming for 10,000 subscribers, so make sure you're joining the already existing legends on the channel and help us get to that milestone. But in the meantime, let's jump straight into why you clicked on this video. So yes, the Wing of Astel, the weapon that can do things like this. The Nebula Ash of War borderline allows you to stagger any basic enemy, and if you dual wield them, you can then follow that up with a flurry of attacks, dealing thousands of damage in mere seconds. Not only that, but against main bosses in the game, you also do incredible amounts of damage with the Nebula, and it's incredibly useful for staggering enemies, allowing for a lot of critical hits, depleting their health bars in seconds. Of course, as with every other video, I'm going to throw up the stats of my character on screen for you. Of course, the character is a level 150 character, so it's a level 150 build. So as you can see, we have got 40 vigor, 25 mind, 25 endurance, 10 strength, 34 dexterity, 75 intelligence, 10 faith, and 10 arcane. With the Wing of Astel, you only need 10 strength, 17 dexterity, and then also 22 intelligence in order to wield it and use the weapon correctly. And for the main damage output, everything is boosted by intelligence, especially the Ash of War Nebula. So that's why we're focusing on that particular stat, and it's also the best scaling stat on this weapon. Of course, dexterity is useful as well, as that will boost the main damage you're doing with the base attacks. But essentially, we need to try and get as much dexterity and obviously max out intelligence. And then obviously we need a nice high amount of vigor mixed in with sort of minimal mind and a good amount of endurance to allow us to use a good armor set whilst also keeping at least the medium roll. And obviously for those of you that are regulars around here, you know that with these stats we can add an additional 5 points to every single one of these by using our good friend the Goldrick's Great Rune. I use it in all of my videos because it's the best for builds like this, because it just gives us a boost in every aspect possible. But of course that's not everything, because we've got some really good talismans that we're pairing with all of that as well. Of course, starting off, as you should do with any weapon that uses a skill power, we've got the Shard of Alexander, which greatly boosts those Ash of War uses. But then we're also running the Carrion Filigreed, because where we don't have, say, a huge amount of mind, having this on makes us use less FP when using the Nebula, allowing us to basically use it multiple times without having to worry about putting so many points into mind. And then again, for damage output, we also have the Magic Scorpion Charm on, boosting the damage output by 12% once again with the Nebula, as well as the charged heavy attack with the Wing of Astel. And then lastly, we've got the Erdtree's Favor, the +2 variant, to increase our health, our equipment load, and also our stamina. And as you can probably see with the footage that's going on in the background, this thing can literally destroy most bosses and enemies in the game. I'll be honest, I didn't really use the charged heavy attack too much, but essentially what it is it's similar to the Dark Moon's Greatsword heavy attack, where it sends a wave of magic towards your enemies and can also stagger them as if you're hitting them with a heavy attack. That is also the trick with the Nebula as well, because it spreads the Nebula across in front of you, basically doing about 5 or 6 different explosions of magic damage, which all stagger for stance damage. So if you're coming up against a big enemy, like say Godfrey in this example, you can hit them multiple times with one use of the Nebula. It's also very good for crowd control, so if you're coming up against multiple enemies at once, one use of this and they're pretty much all dead. And as you saw with the example at the very beginning of the video, if you are coming against, say, normal enemies going through like different dungeons or caves, etc., you can use the Nebula to basically stun lock those enemies, and if if you're dual wielding these things, you can then hit them with a large flurry of attacks, dealing an immense amount of damage. And I do highly recommend using them dual wield. However, the Wing of Astel is also very good just on its own. And of course, with all of the damage output, there are ways to increase it even further rather than just with the talismans, because if you want to use the Wonder Physic, we can also include the Magic Shrouding Crack tier as well as the Stone Barb Crack tier to both boost the damage output with the Nebula and the charged attack once more, and then the Stone Barb Crack tier will also boost the amount of stance damage that we're doing, staggering our enemies a lot quicker and allowing for a lot more critical hits. So that's what I run with the Wonder Physic to make this build even more powerful and even more of a stance breaker than what it already was. And then if you want to also mix in Golden Vow by putting that onto a random dagger, so you don't need to put the points into Faith, you can also use that to increase the amount of damage you deal and also boost your own defense. And I've got to be honest, I don't know why I don't use this weapon more often, because it is a lot of fun and it's extremely satisfying, especially when you hit all of the nebulas against a certain enemy, dealing literally thousands of damage with each use of the nebula. The fact that you can pick this up also very early on in your game, and you sort of don't need too many stats into intelligence or dexterity to use it, makes it a very viable weapon to basically carry you through the entire game. I know when I did my top 5 weapon list, which you guys seem to really enjoy back then, and not really many people were using that weapon back then, and I still feel to this day that it is slept on and no one is really using it, because so many other builds have been considered overpowered and sort of like the meta in Elden Ring, especially when you think of things like the Moon Veil that we covered not too long ago, and also the Reduvia more recently. Things like the Wing of Astel get overlooked as just to how powerful they can actually be. Of course, if you wanted to say use a similar weapon, you can also use the Bastard Stars. After defeating the Astral boss and using his remembrance, you can also use that because it's very similar stats and it has a very similar nebula, although the wingspan of the nebula effect, if you will, is a lot larger and it wraps around you a bit more, so you could potentially use that as an alternative, but you do need a few more stats, I think, in dexterity to use the Bastard Stars. But it is very similar if you just wanted to say use one weapon rather than dual wielding the Wing of Astel. But yeah, that is essentially the insane slept on build that you need to be using right now if you're not, because it can catch out a lot of people as well on PvP, because where the explosions happen sporadically and also in different areas, it's not just say continuous from one side to the other, it can really catch people off guard in PvP thinking that the Ash of War has finished when it hasn't, and there's still 1 or 2 more explosions happening, and they tend to normally walk into it if they're trying to attack you. So it can be a very viable weapon in PvP as well, but then also in PvE it does insane damage, especially when all of those nebulas hit a boss, dealing thousands of damage and more often than not staggering your enemies, allowing you to follow up with a critical hit as well. Of course, like with all of our builds and all of our weapon videos, do let me know if you've got any ways to improve this even more. I'm sure there is, because again, most of you already know I'm not the best at Elden Ring, and I'm sure I've probably missed something integral, so definitely let me know if I have. Let me know if you use this weapon at all. It'll be really interesting to know what you're running at the moment. But other than that, obviously if you happen to like this video, like I said earlier, make sure you leave that like rating. It lets me know that you enjoy this type of content and you want to see more, and it helps out the channel tremendously. And if you want to stay up to date with the rest of the videos that are coming out on this channel, do hit that subscribe button. I'm sure it's probably been released already. If it's not, it's coming out very soon, but I've got a first ever Starfield video coming out on the channel, so if you want to check that out, if it's out already or if it's coming out in the future, stay subscribed and you'll be able to see that. But definitely make sure you subscribe, because I will still be doing Elden Ring content along with the Starfield stuff, so if you like both those games, well, I guess you're in the right place for your type of content. But if you're just here for the Elden Ring stuff, don't worry, that's not going anywhere. We'll still be doing videos on Elden Ring as well as Starfield. So yeah, make sure you're up to date with all of that. Go have fun with this weapon and this build, and obviously let me know how you get on. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, hopefully you're having an amazing day, and I guess I'll catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye.